Well, hello everybody. Welcome back. I'm early. Darn it. All right. Hang on a second. I'm early. Can't start. Now how do I do this? Oh well. Okay, I'm already here. How you doing? Oh man, been a long day. All right, let's see. Okay, that's good. Oh, that's good. All systems are go. I got 30 seconds, right? Got myself a little drink here. All right. I'm going to go ahead and start. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being on time. That really helps out a lot. Let's go ahead and begin the show, as we say. We are at the Greater San Diego Association of Realtors, and my name is Kevin Burke, and there is my telephone number, and there is my email address. I'd really rather speak with you, but if you can't get a hold of me by phone, you can always send me an email and let's arrange a time to talk. Maybe I can help, whatever it is that you're in need of. So anyway, thank you. Okay, so 37, 36, it's counting down. I have some credentials. I guess the biggest credential for purposes of today's discussion is probably the fact that I've had my license since 1979. So I have been on more than one listing appointment, to say the least. And I used to carry a pretty good load. I used to carry about 18 to 22 transactions at a time, and certainly closing well over 100 a year. And other than that, no big deal, right? I do teach continuing education for attorneys, real property law. I've taught all the classes that you've needed to get a license in the first place. And by the way, I teach them in several states. And I'm chair of a whole bunch of committees and stuff. So there you go. Risk management is kind of my thing. So I take everything with a grain of salt, but at the same time, I'm pretty principled about what I do. So that being said, we're going to be talking about stuff today that is going to appear to be legal. But I want to be pretty clear that I'm not a practicing attorney. I have no interest at all. They work way harder than we do. I do a lot of trial work, limited to testifying as an expert witness, and that's a court title. It's a court certified expert witness. And so remember, the Department of Real Estate doesn't want you to call yourself an expert unless it's in a title of some kind, and a title somebody else gives you, probably not your own title, like the neighborhood expert. That'll get you in trouble every time. So standard of care is my issue, code of ethics, things like that, agents' duties of inspection and disclosure, market conditions in San Diego County. Those are the things that I kind of hang my hat on. Let's see here. Conversation day not intended to be a substitute for the advice of your broker, nor for that of your attorney. Please consult with them as appropriate. So our webinars are intended to be interactive. You help me a lot by asking questions and things like that. And so it kind of, sometimes I forget to say something, or sometimes you're seeing something that I don't see, and that really helps me out. So please utilize the Q&A button to ask questions or offer input. I do really look forward to hearing from you. It's kind of nice to know that people are there. Let me make sure I'm recording. This is being recorded, by the way, so just so everybody's aware of that. Nobody can see you, and they can't see your questions. When you type in the questions, I'll usually read the questions so that everybody gets the benefit of the question being asked. I might refer to your first name. I never refer to last names, those kinds of things. So just, in the interest of full disclosure, as we say, this morning, we had quite a class on mastering my farm. That was a lot of fun. And then this afternoon, we're going to talk about creating a winning listing presentation. And I'm going to show you various aspects of that. On Tuesday, we're going to launch into the new CAR forms. So there's a whole bunch of them out there, new and revised forms, I should say. And then in the afternoon, we're going to be talking a lot about how to create a template in Zip Forms, but we're going to talk about leases and how we do those kinds of things, and why they're important. I hope you're representing tenants in transactions, because right now the sales market is kind of it's a lot different than it was not that long ago. And the reason behind that is because the market has changed. And so, frankly, a lot of sellers are deciding not to sell, and that's why our inventory is so low. Of course, the newspapers tell everybody that, the market's crashing and all that kind of stuff. But what's really going on is there's really nothing to buy. And by the way, that's true across the country. When I was speaking yesterday in West Virginia, this morning in Virginia, and so, I get around and I'm usually talking and people think, the gray hair makes me look credible. So I'm getting away with it. So just so you're aware of that. So member benefits today, we're going to thank you, of course, for joining us for our discussion of how to create a winning listing presentation. And so, as I said earlier, I've been on my share of listing appointments, and I've got a really good track record. Our strategy today, which has always been my strategy, is to get 100% of the listings that you want to get. And frankly, there are going to be some of those that you don't want. And part of the secret of success is identifying which ones you don't want. Now, I know some people will say take them all at any cost, any price, doesn't matter. I don't know that I necessarily agree with that. And so part of that has to do with with a problem that I have. It's called an attitude problem. But we'll talk about that in a minute. So the more listing appointments that you go on, the greater your chances of success. I think that's pretty clear, right? You always have your first one, right? So you always have your first appointment. There's always the first date, that kind of thing. But the more that you learn, the more appointments that you go on, the more you will learn, and your chances of success are going to increase. The more confident you will become, that's pretty clear. The calmer you will become, that hopefully happens. And then finally, the more successful you'll be. And so, I find that, you can't expect to hit a home run every time you're up at the plate. Some people have greater chances of hitting home runs than others, but it's not rational to think that every single time you're up there, you're going to hit a home run. So that's okay. I've been pretty selective in my business. I think I've hit a lot of home runs. But again, we'll talk a little bit about that. So it is definitely a numbers game. There's no doubt. I do admit I have an attitude problem. And so I tell everybody it's an incurable disease. Early in my career, I went on a listing appointment thinking, oh my goodness, I hope I get this listing. That was very, very early in my career. Then now when I go on a listing appointment, I'm thinking, do I want this listing? And as we know, sometimes we get into meetings with people that we're clearly not going to get along with. I don't know. I've got the luxury of saying I don't want it. Unfortunately, when I say that, a lot of times they end up talking me into it. So, but it does set the stage, and early in the game is always better. So if you're going to have a problem, let's have it early. But they have to realize they hired you for a reason. They didn't hire you to be a puppet. They hired you to do your job. And so hopefully you're going to know what your job is. Okay. And so, wow. Hey, everybody. Thank you all for being here. We have some real celebrities. This is great. Thank you. I appreciate you taking the time today, right after a good lunch, I hope. So again, please ask questions. Because it helps me out. But I do have an attitude problem. I have to admit it. And I'm a happy guy, right? I take listings that I want to take. I service them. At this point in my career, you can imagine after 44 years, I usually just send them listing agreements. They sign them, and I get to do whatever I want to do. But there is quite a difference in those two ideologies. Oh my gosh, I hope I get the listing versus, do I want this listing? And so, when I go in on the appointment, I'm going in there. I'm not sure I want it. The seller's going to have to convince me of that. And so even if you have trouble believing that, understand that it's the approach that will help you, and that is that it is okay not to get every listing. It is okay. All right. Now our goal is to try to get every listing, again, the ones that we want. Okay. All right. So I always ask this question, and I don't know if anybody's doing this, and show of hands kind of thing. Are you going to be sending a pre-listing packet? I found them to be fairly problematic, but they're just a big book of advertising. When I was management with the Rock people, I had agents that would send these pre-listing packets ahead of the listing appointment. They got to a point where they actually had a runner that would do it. They would drive around, they would drop them off on the doorstep, because the next day that call was going to happen. And so I found them to be really just a big marketing tool, which is good. There's nothing wrong with that. But then I started to see people send it before listings had expired. And so what they were doing was they were counting 90 days because they just assumed it was a 90-day listing. And so, on day number 89, they would, of somebody else's listing now, they would have this package delivered that said, here I am, I'm wonderful, those kinds of things, and I'm number one. And I developed early in my career, I decided everybody else kept telling everybody how they were number one. So I decided that I would make the client number one. And so my logo, my theme was, you're number one with us, that kind of thing. So that being said, pre-listing kit, again, I'm not convinced. I've seen some really good ones, but at the same time, I think that the surprise attack is usually better. So that's just my experience. Make sure, so we're going to get into the strategies now of how to do all this. And so the first thing I want to tell you about is that if you're going to have an appointment, when you make that phone call, I mean, normally you don't just walk in on an appointment, but normally you'll set the phone call up ahead of time. There'll be a couple of things that you'll want to ask the seller on the phone. Some people say, ask, are they interviewing anybody else? I think sometimes that just, gives them an idea to do so. They maybe, how many should I interview? That kind of thing. Well, I'm the only one you need, right? So, but I have gone on appointments where I will get there and I'll walk in the door and there will be, business cards on the table, real estate agent business cards on the table. And so I already know now that they're talking to other people. So that always makes me feel better. Actually, I like the fact, but normally if I'm going to set up, if I do ask the question, how many are you going to be interviewing? They say 3, and I say, can you do me a favor? And then I always ask it in the form of a question, right? And it always lended at the end of days that I ask a lot of questions. And so, can you do me a favor? And then they say, what's that? I said, well, you've already got the other 2 appointments scheduled. So can you make me at the end? Don't put me in front. I want to be at the end. And they say, why is that? And I say, well, because I want you to hear the other people's story before you hear mine. But you have to promise me one thing. And they say, what's that? I said, you won't sign a listing agreement with anybody until you have heard my story. Okay. And so, they're okay with that. Almost every single time they'll say, oh yeah, not a problem at all. Well, I just booby trapped the listing appointment for agents, number 1 and 2 that were ahead of me, right? Didn't I? Because I said, you have to promise me, and they promise me that you won't sign a listing agreement with anybody until you've heard my story. And I'm going to come in, I'm going to close the whole thing. And so, nobody else knew what happened. I mean, what happened? We had a listing appointment. Well, I'm sorry, we've got another appointment, or whatever they want to tell those agents. Those agents are going to have to get pretty strong, to get the seller past the promise that they made to me. Does that make sense? So my first principle is, of course, if I'm having that conversation ahead of time, then I will set the stage for success in the very beginning. Make sure that all the decision makers, I say all, and I underline it, I put it in red, all the decision makers are going to be at the appointment. Okay, so typically it's not only those people whose names appear on title. There can be a lot of reasons that there are other people that are decision makers. Like our parents lent us the down payment, $50,000, so they're part of the decision on who we're going to list it with. And so if I'm going to go on the appointment, I don't find out about that, until I get there, then I'm going to be thinking, okay, I got to do another presentation. And so I really want everybody there. So are all the decision makers going to be there? Do you owe anybody anything? That kind of thing. So while for purposes of contract, we need to know whose names appear on title, because we're going to want to have that in the listing agreement. But at the same time, hi, Chris. But at the same time, we need to ask the question. And on a more basic, like for example, it's a property's owned by a husband and wife, for example. I think I can still say that in California, right? But it's owned by a husband and wife. I get to the listing appointment and the wife is there, the husband is not there. There are a lot of things that can trigger, right? Like one of them is that maybe the husband's not aware the property's for sale, and and so maybe y'all should have talked about this before I came out. But it can also mean, well, he's at work right now. Well, and so nobody's signing, the listing agreement. I can get her to sign the listing agreement, but it's only enforceable against her. It's not enforceable against him because he doesn't, he's not there. And that's usually, sometimes they'll set you up with that. They'll put they'll have one of the parties there. Hi, Renee. They'll have one of the parties there who will be like the scout, right? And then you end up having to do a whole nother presentation. You convince the one, but then the other one wants convincing too. So why don't we just do it all at the same time, right? I mean, certainly the other appointments that you have, you're not, splitting everybody up and doing things like that. But and what's to be afraid of? I'm nobody to be afraid of much. But anyway, so everybody understands what I'm saying. And I have written offers on properties where the seller's agent had only Mr. Seller on title. Mrs. Seller was not aware that the property was for sale. And so we call that a marital restructuring, right? So they're going to restructure their marriage, and the husband thinks he can sell the property without the wife's being involved in it, and that is a mistake on a lot of levels. Okay, and if anything else, it just upsets everybody. And so, and in a particular situation on property, I wrote an offer on in Lynetta and Del Mar. It cost the seller Mrs. Seller wasn't going to sign anything. It cost Mr. Seller 10 grand to get her to sign stuff. So, the situation between the two of them apparently was already not friendly, but I had written an offer on the property and I only got back Mr. Seller's signature. And I said to the seller's agent, I said, "Where's Mrs. Seller?" And their response was, "Well, we're trying to get that taken care of right now." And so here was the problem, because you only had one of the necessary signatures. The MLS rules say after you have all of the necessary signatures, you can put it in the MLS. But in that case, they only had one of the necessary signatures. And so it was only enforceable against the one, not the other. The other was refusing, and it's in the MLS. You're paying me a commission. Okay, that's the bottom line, right? So because you have it in the MLS, it's an unconditional offer of compensation, and I'm coming after the money, right? So because you're telling everybody you had everything you needed when in fact you did not. So this is an important concept to remember. Hopefully that'll help you when you're getting your listing signed, that you won't have issues with those things. Is everybody okay with that? You clear with what I'm saying? It's really important. If its title is held in trust, you need to see the trust cert. We've got a transaction right now. It's taken over a week for me to get the seller's agent to send us a copy of the trust cert. And so what I end up getting is a photograph from a cell phone, which has been kind of the nature of this whole transaction. Has all been parts. So anyway, okay, so just so everybody's aware of that. Otherwise, your appointment just is just a friendly gossip session. It really is, because if you don't have everybody there that you need to have a valid listing agreement, then again, you're just making time there. That's all you're doing. Okay. All right. So of the decision makers, you will need to quickly identify the key decision maker. And I always say, that it could be 5-year-old Johnny. I mean, sometimes the kid is the one making the decisions, and I've had that happen where the kid is obviously running the family, and I think they're afraid of the kid, right? And so if the kid doesn't like you, you're probably not going to get the listing. But you need to identify it fairly quickly. I had a business partner for 15 years, and we would walk into a listing appointment, and she got really good at identifying right away. You could tell who was going to bond with her, who was going to bond with me, and so we always played that card really well. And so again, she was good at deciding who was the one that was going to be calling the shots in the deal. And so we're going to talk a little bit about that in a minute, because a lot of this is if you haven't read any books on neuro-linguistic programming, or YouTube's got great videos on all these things anymore. Hardly anybody reads. So but some great videos out there. Anyway, watch out for Johnny. And so the time that you spend in that first meeting, this is just something I have learned. The time you spend that first meeting is worth more than all the time that you will spend with them later. So if you have a longer listing appointment, that is one of the best things that can happen with you, because that'll cut down your time later that you will have to spend explaining things that are going on. I took a listing in Lake Forest. 3.5 hours. I sat with the seller for 3.5 hours, and we filled out every single disclosure, every single everything. You know, we got the homeowner's docs order, the NHD was done already, and then we had they signed the listing agreement, and we're off, right? So, but 3.5 hours, okay. I had another listing appointment early in my career. I worked very closely with law enforcement, and I had a buddy of mine who was with the sheriff's department, and I remember going to an appointment. He worked graveyard, and so the appointment that we ended up setting was at 10 o'clock at night on his day off. And then of course it dawned on me at 5 o'clock in the morning that whoops, his day's just going, and of course I'm in a listing appointment from 10 p.m. to 5 a.m. so a 7-hour appointment. I got the listing, okay, if that's all that was really important, but I got very little sleep that day, so which doesn't impact me, but just be aware of your surroundings, know what you're dealing with. And so sometimes some of us may have to take a position we don't want to be at an appointment at 10 o'clock at night, but that was the only time that worked for him. And then it became a challenge, right, because he was a day sleeper, and so showing the property became challenging, and it was almost always on his days off, so things like that. So make sure you understand all the parts is what I'm trying to say. It is okay to have a long listing appointment. I'm going to tell you, it is okay. I prefer the longer listing appointment because then I don't have to spend as much time with them later. It's kind of like when when my mother passed away, and we had this is 2 years ago now, but 2.5 years, but I ended up having to deal with the probate issue. She had no will, no trust. Listen to me, no, knew everything, right? Yeah. So anyway, but the attorneys made a good comment. They said, we really like working with you because you understand our language. And so I'm just telling you, try to understand your client's language and where they're coming from. Get an idea of their surrounding. What does their life look like? It'll help you dealing with yours. Be realistic with the seller. And so I know people that take listings at any price, any terms. They don't care. They just want to have another number. But you got to be realistic at the same time. And so my overall impression is that the more unreasonable that the seller is, the more they're going to come back at me for not telling them the truth. So we need to be realistic. Okay. So when it comes to pricing, show them the data and have them sign off on it. So one of the things that I do is I do an RPR, that's National Association of Realtor Property Resource. I may do a CMA, we'll talk about that. But the RPR has, it takes its information from 300 different data sources. So it tends to be really accurate. The CMA is kind of the older way that we used to do things. And I do teach the class on it. You can be pretty good at it. But what the CMA does is the CMA looks at only what's in the multiple listing service. So we look at, and that's input by real estate agents. So we have, you have your different, active pendings, things like that. And you'll have solds, and you'll have access to the remarks sections, which is really good. But a lot of times, the solds will not be all of the solds. And so what we used to do in the old days was we used to contact the title company and say, would you give us, sold comps, right? Sold comparable properties. And then we would hold the stuff we had in the MLS up to the light to the other stuff. And then we would try to figure things out. And so again, we've got some really good software, like you have Cloud CMA available to you for free on the SDR website. I think you should utilize these things. The free version, by the way, is obviously not all the bells and whistles versions. And so those are, if you want to upgrade and do stuff like that, you got to pay extra for it. Some brokerages give them to you for free. Again, talk to your broker about that as far as pricing is concerned. But I want whatever it is that you use, I want you to physically show it to them, and I would have them sign off. And the reason I do this with the sellers, I do it with the buyer. I do it with the seller because I want the seller, I want to set expectations early in the equation. So to the seller, I say, here's where I think your property should be priced to sell, right? Because we're not here to market, we're here to sell. So here's where where I think the property needs to be priced. Here's where I've got it, here's where you've got it. Almost invariably, I've had one time in my career where a seller told me I was high, and it wasn't, marijuana or anything like that, that I was high. It was a property down on Colina Way in San Diego. And I did the comps and everything on the property. The property was a single family home. This was 20 years ago. It was $279,000 all day long. And so the seller said to me, "We think you're overpriced." And this is the seller telling me, right? I'm like, "Oh, really? Okay. And what do you want it to be?" And they said, "Well, we think it should be priced at 176." And so I'm thinking 279, 176. And so I said, but I want you to sign this right here that I told you it was 279. And so they said, "That's okay, not a problem, but we want to sell the house." And it turned out they were going through a marital restructuring, and they were still on speaking terms at the time. And so we priced it 176,000. We had offers for 100, offers for 400 and change. Agents were writing really crazy offers, hoping to get rid of all the other. I had 36 offers. I countered every single one of them. And that's part of my class on Tuesday, the template class. I'll show you how to counter multiple offers and stuff. So bottom line is that we ultimately ended up selling the property for exactly what I said it was worth. And I didn't use that as a told you so, but I used it in case the seller did only sell it for 176. I wanted to be able to defend the fact that I told him it was worth what it was worth. And so, I'm always happy to get them more money if I can. But again, that's going to go to pricing, and we'll talk about pricing because I have a really cute way to get a lot of offers on a property and get a good price that'll ultimately sell for higher than what you're probably asking for it. So you have three choices of venues, and when we talk about venue, it's like, where am I going to meet the seller? And so I'm going to have a number of different ways of doing that. The first one, of course, is going to be to go to the owner's house. I kind of like that one the best. I just think that just sitting around and talking and we're just folks and stuff like that. I always found that to be the best. Maybe it's not your style. Maybe you're like like some people are just really, really shy and they'd really rather do it all on the internet or something like that. But I think for a lot of reasons, the house is good. There's some negatives to it, like for example, your safety, things like that. What happens if things get out of hand and stuff. So there's a lot of things that can happen. But probably the worst thing is that they're too comfortable in the house, and that is that I have had them start to have that change of mind kind of thing, like, "Oh, do we really want to sell? I mean, we love this house, right?" And you notice how I keep using the word house. I never use the word home with a seller. I always use the word house, and when I'm talking to the buyer, I always use the word home, because I want the buyer sensitized to it and I want the seller desensitized to it. So, but going to the owner's house, I think, has a lot of merit to it. Plus, I really need to do an inspection of the house anyway. That I really need to have the listing input sheet done, all those things. Those are important things. And so, and we have a sheet, we have the listing input sheet that we actually use when we go on an appointment, and we fill it out. It's in your MLS, right, under MLS documents. And so we fill it out. And part of the principal reason behind that, and again, why being in the house is the best way to do it, is that, it jars our memory. It's kind of like, we read you your rights. We don't, we Mirandize people. We don't, hopefully you don't, but you essentially have a sheet, a trigger sheet that tells you to ask these questions. So for example, washer, dryer. And then, so are you going to leave the washer dryer, or is the washer dryer going to convey? Is it gas? Is it electric? Is it, both? These are questions that you're going to have to answer on the listing input sheet in order to be accurate about things. Okay. So going to the owner's house, a lot of advantages to that. I'm good with it. I prefer it personally. But what else can I do? I can have the owner come to me, right? The office is probably a really good professional place to meet the owner. So maybe my office has been, over many years, has been coffee shops. So I'll literally be in the coffee shop. I'll go to the owner, if not to the house. I'll go someplace where we can meet, and fairly privately when we do. But you know, and I might be doing that for my own safety. And it's like, it's somebody I don't know. I might have them come to my office where I can introduce them to people. Bad guys tend not to, you know, get crazy, you know, when now they know other people can identify them. And then and also a public place. You know, I'm usually quite the spectacle when I'm at the coffee shop, right? I'm pretty animated, and so people are going to remember me one way or another. Hopefully for the better, right? But the idea being that, you know, for safety purposes, to get them away from the process again, get them away from the house, you know, try to desensitize them to the house. I may not want to have that appointment in the house, and so it's a little bit easier if I do it that way. Does that make sense to everybody? And so and plus I've got access to the copy machine. You know, I've got, you know, I like having a buyer and seller in the office, because, you know, I put the, you know, we have the computer monitor up on the wall, and I've got the MLS going, and I'm showing them things in the MLS, and, you know, I can narrow down a buyer's, you know, the search for a home for a buyer just by having them in front of the MLS and talking to them with that. I use that as a closing tool with a buyer. You know, what are you looking for exactly? Well, let me show you what the MLS says, you know, on that. You know, you want you want to buy a house for $100,000. You want it to be oceanfront in Del Mar. Okay, well, let's go ahead and take a look. And so I pull up, you know, 92014, and I look for a house that's priced under $100,000. And here's how many there are: 0. And I said, well, maybe we have to raise the price a little bit. and so I said, I'll tell you what, instead of playing the game where we try to, you know, the shell game, trying to figure out how much an oceanfront house, you know, can I find one for 120,000? Let's just go ahead and look at the oceanfront houses, and we see 24 million, 27 million. So we're probably not going to get to that 100, but you see what I'm saying? I can usually clean up a lot of stuff by having them live in front of me. And this is why I believe very strongly in buyer questionnaires and seller questionnaires and things like that. And again, I use the listing input sheet as a questionnaire, and for a way for me to jog the seller's memory about stuff I'm going to need to know to put it in the MLS. So again, having them in the office might be a good way to do that. Okay, everybody good there? I could probably talk for hours on just these three. Doing everything over the internet, that's an option, right? But I think if you're going to do everything over the internet, that doesn't mean you send things to the seller and say, figure it out, right? You know, I had a case not long ago where the seller's agent's defense to everything, or I'm sorry, the buyer's agent's defense in this case to everything was, well, I gave them the disclosures and I told them to call me if they had any questions. That is not a defense. Okay. And I'm giving you that in my expert opinion. That is not a defense. So, you know, you need to sit down with the people, you need to talk with them, you need to show them that kind of thing. And if you can't do it, you know, in person, the seller is selling a house in San Diego, but they are living in Wyoming. Well, maybe I have to do it on the internet. Maybe it's a Zoom call, and you know, it's going to be more than 40 minutes. So you can't use the free version. You're going to have to pay for it. Or I personally like Microsoft Teams. Google Meet is really good. This is a Zoom call that we're on right now. There's some security issues for me, at least. Not for you, but for me, there's some security issues with Zoom. And so I'm not 100% comfortable with it, but I know what I'm looking for if there's going to be a problem. But anyway, on the internet, if they're going to have a listing appointment, you know, what I prefer to do, if I can't be there, then I'm going to pull it up on my screen. I'm going to share screen with the seller. I'm going to have the seller I'm going to go through the information with the seller. And just like that RPA that's 16 pages long, you got to know what you're talking about. It is the standard form. Now, it's been out for over a year and a half now. If you haven't ever read it, then you're falling right into the same trap that everybody's in, and that is they never read it. And so then I get people quoting language to me like, well, the loan contingency is in effect until the designated loans are funded. Well, we got rid of that back in 2002. So, but I still have people quoting me language from very old contracts. Okay. All right. So if you're going to do everything over the internet, I would recommend that you have a shared platform. Glide works really well for that. I remember going through a transaction with a seller, filling out the transfer disclosure statement, clearly the disclosures, And I literally, I could see what they were doing, as they were checking boxes. And I would say, okay, so you just checked yes. Are you sure that's what you want to check? Let's talk about that for a second. Here's what the question is asking. And I have the ability, I have a license, real estate license. I can explain the standard forms. And English was not their primary language, but we ended up getting along great. It was really good. I mean, it was they really understood it better. The writing was easier than the language speaking. Okay, so and I think we probably have that experience, but it was a great real estate transaction, it really was. But I enjoyed the fact that I could see what they were doing as they were doing it. But again, you have in the Zip Forms program, you actually have software in there. Let me pull up, where did it go? Here it is. So you actually have software in the Zip Forms program called Zip Consult. Of course, I won't be able to find it now that I'm looking for it. Where did it go? Get myself out of the way there. I don't see it. Okay, so let me try a different window. Hold on a second. I think I know where we've hidden it, because that's what we do. We hide things from people so that they can't find them later. So let's go back over here. I'm going to be here, and look at that. Where did it go? All right. Well, anyway, Zip Consult was a free program that CAR provided to everybody. But of course, then we got now we have Lone Wolf owns it, so it's got a little bit of a different look to it. So definitely don't have Zip Consult in here. Isn't that interesting? I'll have to reach out to them and say, where did it go? Okay, but again, you have those other platforms. Zip Consult was really just Any Meeting was what it was called. So you have other platforms that you can use, and Zoom is a good example of one you could use as well. So does everybody understand that? I thought for sure I'd go right to it, and then of course for the first time I'm looking at it, I don't see it. So okay, all right. Obviously, I use other software for that. So let's go back to my presentation. So doing everything over the internet, I'm not 100% against it. I just think that it is better than here, sign this, right, with no input from the agent whatsoever. And those are really bad cases. Okay. All right. So all of the above have their pluses and minuses, and we went through those, right? And again, like I said, avoid the temptation of just sending paperwork and telling them to figure it out, because that's essentially what you are doing. My phone is trying to figure out what I'm saying here. Okay, so appearances. What do I appear like? When I go on a listing appointment, I think you need to dress for success. I don't really care how cool you are. I mean, I get it. Everybody's cool, right? But I really think you should dress like you're doing well. Not crazy well, right? But doing well. So, if I had a Rolls Royce, I'm going to be selective as to what properties I'm going to show up with a Rolls Royce. I mean, if I'm taking the listing of someone who has a Rolls Royce, I got to be careful that I don't upstage them at all. But I do want to dress nicely, and I say that because I've seen people go on listing appointments with surfers trunks on and stuff like that, and I'm just like, okay, but we're buddies, and it's like, okay, I get it, it's all right. I mean, whatever works for you, but I think you really need to be you need to be. They're expecting that that you're a professional, and so you want to be held to that standard, because when you talk about money, you want to get paid for what you do. Okay. Interestingly enough, I was in a webinar this morning in Virginia, and the speaker, who I've worked with for years in San Diego, who moved to Virginia, said that you never say the word commission, you say compensation. And so, because I want to be compensated for my work, and I thought, wow, that's actually pretty good. Every time she says something, I get something else out of it, and so it's interesting. But instead of saying commission, I say compensation. So, but you're expecting to be compensated for your work, and so these duds I'm wearing cost me money, right? So, I don't need to show up with a Rolex, but I get it. Everybody knows what a Rolex is, that kind of thing. Okay, okay. So dress for success, but also appropriately. Okay, so. And again, you want to, we talk about mirror matching. Well, this may not be the time to mirror match. It may be the seller's day off, so they may be greeting you in something other than their normal business attire. But I assure you, if they're a judge, and I've had judges as clients before, if they're a judge, they dress. And so, I don't care, on those situations, treat them with respect, put the tie on, or ladies dress nicely. and appropriately. Okay, so I think business casual is probably best. But if you know that that other person, you know, they're a business person, they're making $780 an hour, then they probably expect you to, you know, show up playing the part. Does that make sense? Okay, very, very important. All right, part of the reason behind that is that you never get a second chance to make a good first impression. I learned that from one of my business partners, and again, that's an old saying, but she's right. You know, you never get a second chance at it. You know, you made your impression. You've got 15 seconds from when they meet you, 15 seconds for y'all to decide if you love each other or not. And so, you know, it's all about the eye contact. It's all about the NLP, the body gestures and motions. It's all about the firmness of the handshake. I've had people say to me, "That's a pretty firm handshake," and I'm not trying to break their bones, right? But I got a strong grip. You know, I taught judo for 10 years, so got a pretty strong grip. But you know, I'm firm, but I'm not, you know, trying to wrestle them to the ground either. So you know, so those are all the little signals that you're sending people at that very first meeting, and I'm covering most all of them. So hopefully this is helpful. I do not wear sunglasses, not to the first meeting. I mean, maybe later on you all decide you're gonna, you know, be drinking beers and stuff out at the pool, but you know, this is not the time to wear sunglasses. All right, so I always leave the sunglasses in the car. I can't tell you, I've been on quite a few appointments where I would accompany somebody on a listing appointment, and I would say, are you going to wear those into the house? And they go, well, I don't have anywhere else to put them. Why don't you put them in the car? And so it's like, you know, they're going to put them in a pocket or something. It's just rough. So don't wear sunglasses at the first appointment. Okay, I don't care how much they cost. But here, I'll give you a list of things I want you to take to the appointment with you. And this is really important because, again, I'm coming back from that attitude problem that I have. I'm just assuming I'm going to get this listing and I'm walking in like I'm getting it. Okay, so the first thing I want to take with me is my confidence. All right, again, remember what we said earlier, you know, you go on enough appointments, you just start generating confidence, right? Like you do, what is it, education and then knowledge, then wisdom. Okay, so you know, those are the steps. So you build into that level. I just happen to have it. I decided that I was really more concerned about other people. It made it a lot easier for me. I stopped worrying about myself. I started thinking about others, and I started to get more confident, you know, that I was really analyzing, trying to figure out what was important to them. Okay, so remember what I said, an incurable disease, PMA, called positive mental attitude. That's my incurable disease. You know, it's a great disease to have. And so, you know, it just is what it is. Clipboard. Now, I'm going to tell you, and I mentioned that in this morning's meeting, as well. Clipboard, I think it's critically important. I really do, for a lot of different reasons. You know, when I do the open house webinar, I say don't have anything in between you and the buyer, right? You don't want to have anything that looks like an artificial barrier. But when I'm on a listing appointment with a seller, I have things I have to bring with me, right? Like, for example, paperwork. And again, this is why I like the one in the house. I like doing the appointment in the house. So I bring a clipboard with me, and I have things on the clipboard, and I have the forms on the clipboard. And I have all the forms in there, and it doesn't necessarily, I always have the disclosures first, right? Because those are the ones where the seller's got to think. And those are the things I'm supposed to be helping them go through. So I'm always going to have the disclosures first. The very last form I'm going to have is going to be the listing agreement. And the reason I'm going to do that is because that's the one they want. It has all the information on it they want to talk about. And I don't want to talk about that yet. I want to decide whether or not we love each other, right? I want to decide whether or not, you know, you think I'm worth this. So let's sit down, let's talk. I don't know what a 15-minute listing appointment looks like. Okay, but I know brokers. I know an agent who does and who carries 135 listings a year. So okay, they 15-minute appointments. They do all their cold calling on expired listings in the morning, and then in the afternoon they go on the appointments they created in the morning. You know, that's pretty successful, but you know, they have a machine. They're a machine. They have a certain way, a system that they approach things with. But they go on the listing appointment. They got 5 appointments in the afternoon or 6 appointments in the afternoon, and so they only have 15 minutes. And so, you know, and I know in conversations with this individual I'm thinking about, you know, it's like 15 minutes. I get up, I'm leaving. And then they look at you and they go, where are you going? I go, well, I got another appointment. And they go, well, what about the listing agreement? Well, here you go. You can list it or not here. And so they sign it, and I end up with a listing, even though really I was just walking away from it because I have another appointment. So, all right, that might be a little arrogant, I guess, right? But I believe that you know, whatever your style is, there's you know, all personalities make money in real estate. That's the way that it is. So I definitely have that clipboard, and I have the listing input sheet at the very top. And that's because we're going to see in a minute, what does my conversation look like when I get to the house? Okay, so clipboard, listing input sheet at the top, copies of anything that you plan to leave with the owner, right? Never leave copies of the listing agreement, right? Because they're probably not going to remember half of any of this stuff. But if you get one of those things, well, we want to think about it overnight. I don't know what that looks like, right? I'm not leaving there without the listing appointment, without the listing signed, okay? And I know that if I leave, I'm never going to get the listing, so I'm just going to, I have to be prepared to either completely blow it off or decide that I'm not leaving until you sign this agreement. So in used car sales or in automobile sales in general, they call it getting the buyer into the box, right? So in this case, I'm getting the seller into the box. Once I'm on the appointment, I'm not leaving until I got it done, all right? And that's what automobile sales teaches their people. So, but I never leave a copy of the listing agreement because I don't want the next agent, if they're going to be looking at somebody else, I don't want them to know my work product. That's just the way that it is. All right. Does that make sense? So you leave them copies of stuff that you plan to leave with them, right? So remember, the DRE used to have a position that you had to give them copies of things they signed right away. They've relaxed that position. The DRE now says you've got 24 hours. So literally you could go back to the office and then send them everything or drop it off later, copies of everything that they've signed. You could have them fill it out on their computer, at their house. You could have them complete it on your tablet. There's a lot of different ways to do it, but never leave copy of the listing agreement. Because that's the one thing, because now that's floating around in the universe with all of your work on it, and they're gonna work the other agent based on what you put in there. Okay, so all right, so tape measure. Why do we have to bring a tape measure? Remember that your MLS requires that you input the room dimensions. Okay, so I always tell everybody, bring the tape measure, and then we'll talk about the camera next. But bring the tape measure because you're going to be required by your MLS to measure length times width. Not height. If I'm measuring length times width times height, now I'm doing volume, and I don't need volume. I just need the room dimensions. I need, how much carpet is this going to take? Okay. And there's a strategy to this. And this is part of my, breaking the ice point with the seller, where maybe the things were really serious before this, but I always tell the seller, have the seller hold the business end of the tape. And so whenever I say to them, you're going to hold the business end, which means I'm holding 0. So I'm holding the end of the tape measure, with the little piece of metal on it. They're holding the actual box where they're going to read the actual dimension that is being measured. Okay. And so when they ask, I tell them, because that's the end you get sued on. Because they ask me, why do you call it the business end? It's because that's the one we get sued on. So we want to be really good about what we do, right? And our MLS only does things in feet. It does it feet and inches. Well, what do I put in there if it's like 10 feet 9 inches? Do I do 11? Do I do? Well, again, that part of the MLS will save you, and that is the part that says it's estimated, but nothing in there at all is going to be a violation of the rule, so you got to put something in there. And again, what a great place to write down the numbers that the seller's dictating, but on the listing input sheet, because there's a place right there that says it. In fact, if you want, I'll send you a copy of our listing input sheet. I've highlighted all the reasons I have to talk to the seller. So I've actually highlighted the areas where the questions are going to come from the seller that I need the answers from the seller, because I clearly don't want it to be my information. I want it to be the seller's information, because I have them sign it. At the bottom page, there's a place for the seller to sign the listing input sheet saying that everything above here is accurate. Okay, good. So you told me the homeowner's dues were $100 a month. They're $300 a month. Now, I ain't paying that bill, and I've got your signature right here said you said it was $100. Okay, but anyway, when they ask, this is what I tell them. Okay, be sure to verify measurements that you take electronically. So if you've used any of those electronic tape measuring things, let's make sure that you verified it, that it's accurate, that it's working. Camera, I told you I always say take a camera with you. I think it needs to be better than a cell phone camera, but I get it. Some of these cameras now are amazingly I mean, like maybe the picture's too good, right? So, use your discretion. I think you should have a professional photographer take the pictures, that kind of thing. I don't think there's a house anymore that shouldn't have that. But the MLS does require you include at least one picture. They prefer it to be the front of the property or the front of the community, and not, it has to be about the property or the neighborhood. That's what the remarks sections are looking for. Okay, so you got 3 days, but you're going to get a warning right away that says that you didn't include at least one photo, because they want a photo. So when you save it as an active listing, you're going to have to put the photo in either then or within 3 days. It's a $150 ticket, right? And they're going to send you a reminder every day. And so you want to have that photo in there. Again, I agree. A photo's worth 1,000 words, right? So, I think you should have a photo in there. I think I would take a photo for purposes of placement for when I put the listing in the into the MLS. But at the same time, remember, I'm probably not going to do I'm probably going to have it professionally photographed, and so those sets of pictures usually don't come the same day. So I didn't get the appointment until Friday, and they're gonna send them to me and all that. And so, but at least that one photo allows me to buy a little bit of time. Again, remember, there's a ticket associated with that. Okay, so tape measure, camera, two of the big things you have to take with you, along with the clipboard, along with the listing input sheet, right? Marketing examples. Now, I want to talk about this a little bit. So talk about, this is bragging time, right? This is where you say, here's some of the things I've been doing. And so probably most of what anybody's doing anymore are on the internet, right? So get a screenshot, do something, and here's some of the things that I do to try to enhance the property's value, et cetera, et cetera. No, we're not going to Photoshop the high tension lines out of the picture. No, not good. I had a lawsuit. I never made it to court, but where the agent literally Photoshopped the power lines out because they thought they thought it would present a better picture. And well, yeah, it did, but the buyer, I didn't know there were power lines like right on top of the house, so I probably wouldn't do that. But your marketing examples, brag, right? I was paying full page in the Union Tribune, $30,000 a day. So, I would do it. I wouldn't do it every week. I would just do it on a Sunday. And then, I'd wait a month. I'd do it again on a Sunday, and then I'd wait a month, do it again on a Sunday. I spent a lot of money doing that, but I'm getting 500, 600 phone calls, at the time, right? So read the book, Who Moved My Cheese? Because, today I don't think that's going to do it. SDAR has a really good relationship with the Union Tribune right now, where you get some great pricing on ads. But again, and they've finally gotten on the internet and done stuff like that. So there's a lot of perks associated with that. Okay. But here I was bragging about full color page ad for 30 grand. And they look at me like, is this the only ad you do? Because, that's a lot of money. And of course I had other examples as well. And so, you can print them, you can photo, take pictures of them, do whatever you're going to do, but give them some idea of what it is that you do to market the property. And so, in Linda's office, she does a lot to market the property, and she has a whole schedule that she follows on things when agents take listings. So mostly today it's going to be internet based. If you've got a listing presentation packet, I put in there, if any. I've had so many people try to create one. There's some really good software programs out there. In fact, your MLS has programs that you can use, like a CMA Presentation Wizards and stuff like that, where you could put together a pretty good listing presentation package for free. There's software out there that will do it for you. There are various groups like KV Core. I'm deep into KV Core right now. It's expensive. It's $500 a month. It does a lot of stuff, folks. I'm telling you, it does a lot of stuff. I don't even know half of what it does, but it does a lot of stuff. So if you're going to have a listing presentation packet, here's the upside of that. It makes you look like you're a pro. It looks like you look like you're prepared. Yeah, you've got pretty color pictures and stuff like that. You look like you've really done your homework before this appointment, and that the seller wants to not be disrespected. Were you prepared for this appointment? That kind of thing. It's kind of like me going to a deposition, and what I don't ever want to hear from opposing counsel is, did you read the deposition of the other expert? I read it. I read it 3 times. I highlighted. I got circles and arrows and diagrams on the back, that kind of thing. So But if you know your listing presentation packet, it can also be virtual, by the way. The RPR program has a really good program in there where you can just flip through the screens and you're not printing it, you know, 72 pages of material. So and frankly, on that issue, when you do the property package to show the seller what the place is worth, that too is something I don't know if I want to print 72 pages. That's expensive, right? And especially if you're doing it in color. So, you know, if you've got a tablet or I think the laptop works better because you can, you know, set it down on the table, it'll stay. And, you know, a lot of these have touch screens now where you can move things. I think those are a great idea. So what's the downside of the listing presentation pack? And I'm going to tell you, I think it's distracting. I think people, you know, if you hand it to them and have them start to play with it, it's going to be hell getting it back again. All right. I mean, I just my experience, you know, they're having a ball. They're not paying attention to me at all. Maybe it's a good time to have them sign things. I mean, you know, they're not paying attention, so they'll sign anything, right? In fact, my former business partner used to say they'll sign anything just to get rid of you. And so it's like, okay, I took that as a compliment. And somebody said later on that was very insulting. I go, really? I didn't see it that way, but okay. But I'm okay if they'll sign anything to get rid of me. I'm all right. I'm okay going home. Okay, so for our purposes, listing presentation packet, it could be a distraction. At the same time, it could set you apart from the other agents that are on the appointment. Because remember, you want to differentiate yourself from others. And I'm going to show you a really good way in this presentation today on how to do that. So again, pluses and minuses, we talked about that. Comp analysis. So again, RPR, I like RPR a lot. 300 data sources, it's pretty good. I use it in my trial work, you know, things like that. It's a pretty good program. And there you go, the data sources. The CMA is good. It's known as the comparative market analysis. That was what it started out as. Then it became the competitive market analysis. And I don't know what people use for the, you know, what the initials mean anymore for people, but this is how we started out when I got my license back before there was dirt, right? Okay, so but it's MLS data only. It doesn't, you know, it shows you some sales, all the sales that were reported by the real estate agent, but it doesn't show you all the sales. And so that's one of the reasons I kind of like, you know, maybe using multiple programs. It was a problem for us when we created the CMAs back many years ago because we really, literally, we were really guesstimating what the property was going to be valued at. And I always figure I'm going to get the, you know, the conversation with the seller is going to be completely different anyway when I go on the appointment than what I think it's going to be. Curriculum vitae, your CV, you know, your resume, the all about me thing. I would do it in the form of bullet points. I wouldn't do a narrative that's 12 pages long. And again, if you use the MLS's listing presentation, you'll find that you know they're gonna go to sleep. Okay, and so and for me, my CV is literally 6 pages long. They don't care about, you know, and that's only in the last 10 years. Even Linda says, how come it doesn't have anything before that? And I say, well, I really don't keep, you know, I don't want people to know. And so, you know, because real estate makes a great cover, doesn't it? So, but, you know, I got that CV that has all these, you know, things that I've done, none of which I ever set out to do in the first place. But should you bring that along? I think arguably don't spend a lot of time on it. And then here in 1999, I did this. I wouldn't spend a lot of time on that. I would just say, hey, look, here's a bunch of stuff. And you know what I always do? I say, you know, here it is. And by the way, awards are for things you did in the past. I want to know what you're doing for me today. That's my philosophy. And so they love to hear that because why? Because they know I'm going to be, you know, I'm going to be expected to do things for them and make things work and in a professional manner. I say be interested, don't be interesting. I'm not really so sure the stuff on my CV would, you know, anybody would know what it meant. But when if you're an attorney or clearly a judge that sees my CV and they see the American Jurisprudence Award in real estate transactions, well, that means a lot to them. But I'm playing to that audience, right? Because it's like it's a national award. You know, I know my stuff in real estate, and that's what they're looking for because they hired me to tell them what real estate looks like. Okay, so be interested. Be interested in the people that you're with. Don't be an interesting. You know, you're not that. I'm sorry. You are very important. I'm not that important. So, and I always tell people, and they introduce me and say, and this is Kevin Burke. And I go, hi, how are you? I'm Kevin, and I'm not that important. And I start to walk away and they're like, oh, yes, you are. And I'm like, all right, I don't need that. I don't care because it's not really about me. This is about you. Okay. All right. Okay. So Linda helps me keep grounded on that. Opening lines. Let's talk about opening lines. I mean, the conversation for me, this is among the most important questions that you're going to ask the seller. When I get there, can you take me on a brief tour of the property? Brief, and whatever that is, but I will almost always, you know, when I get to the front door, I will knock on the door, I will step back because I want so they can, you know, get an idea of the big picture and the people. I'm obviously friendly. I'm wearing, you know, I'm wearing my colors. You know, I've got the badge on, the logo. I just went out and bought shirts. I just figured I was tired of losing the backing plates for those badges, so I went out and bought shirts. And so you know, at one point they were $12 at Queensboro. I don't know how much they are now. But anyway, can you take me on a brief tour? So I'll step back, they'll let me in, I will shake their hand, I will make eye contact, I'll be respectful, and then I'll go in and I'll almost always ask, I will always ask this question, and they will almost always lead me, but I usually give them a cue that I like to go left to right. I like to go in a clockwise pattern, show me the house, please. Okay, and that's important because remember, I've got my listing input sheet with me, so I'm taking notes. All right, I want to show you how important this is. Do you mind if I take notes? Ask the question. Don't just start, you know, writing things down, because then they think that maybe you're doing something that you know, that you're creating a case or something against them, right? But ask them, are you okay if I take notes? And then while I'm in this process and they're showing me around, I'll be writing these on. I'm going to write these on my clipboard, right? So, whoops, I put it in the wrong place. So I write these on the clipboard, and again, that's what the clipboard is really good to work with because it's got at least a good solid back, and you can write on it, stuff like that. And if they start talking, you know, I'm almost always, I don't care how fast they talk, right? I'm almost always going to stop them and say, oh, hang on a second. I just want to make sure I've got this right. Okay, you just said, and is that what that? Okay, good. I just want to make sure I was okay. All right, and it's self-deprecating behavior, but that's okay. But I do that because I want them to know how important it is. When I was very early in my real estate career, I learned that it was really important to them that you cared enough about them and their story that you wrote everything down. Now, I got a fairly photographic memory, so when I would walk out of the appointment and I would throw the notes in the trash, right? And it's like, why? Because it really was for their benefit, not mine. But then later on, I realized that might be a good defense for me to have those notes. And so now I take the notes, I go back home with them, I scan them, I put them on the computer. I try not to have paper around, but that's how I do it. But definitely ask the question, do you mind if I take notes? Because I need it to be permission based. Okay. All right. Now, what do these marks on the kitchen door jamb represent? And you know what I'm talking about. We're talking about they're measuring the kids' height and stuff like that. You want them to know that you're observant, but at the same time, you don't want to spend a lot of time on it. You know, we raised our kids in this house. Maybe we shouldn't be moving. You know, I don't want to get that. Okay, but you know, be observant. It's something that'll endear and it'll bring a, you know, tug at their heartstrings, that kind of thing. Probably a good thing to do. Okay, write everything down on your listing input sheet in front of them. Okay, I want them to see that you're writing everything down. All right, but put it down, write it all down on the listing input sheet. Right now, so far, folks, any stress yet? I mean, other than the stress that we do to ourselves when we're going to go on an appointment like this, there shouldn't be any stress. You're planning what you're going to do, and that's why we're in this position right now where we're going to be we're writing everything down on the listing input sheet. Now I've told you where to write it down. You don't have to be looking for pretty stationery or anything like that. Just put it right on the listing input sheet. You're going to need your notes later, okay? Because that listing input sheet should be what you do to input the listing. Most real estate agents, they just go straight to the computer. They turn the MLS on, they go into the computer, and then they just hunt and peck, try to answer questions as they go. I don't think that's very professional. In fact, I think it's unprofessional. I think you really should have something that you can look back to make sure that you've got it right. Okay, because you know, a lot of times a mistake. For example, I've had cases. You know, the refrigerator. You know, or better yet, gas or electric stove. right? And they put down that it's gas when in fact it's electric. And so you put in the MLS that it's gas, and now they want a gas stove, and you might end up buying a gas stove, because remember, Civil Code 1088 is the one that we are liable for. Hi, Teresa. That we are liable for when we make a mistake when we put a listing. Okay, I'm so glad you're here. Thank you. Okay, so while they are speaking, you're writing things down. All right. So you need to make sure, I don't know why we use the word down. Maybe we're writing things up. I don't know. But it's important that you tell them that what they are saying is very important to them. And I'll frequently, if I'm talking with someone and I don't understand, or they talk too fast, or they mumble to something, I may say, what you're saying, or like probably most commonly is on the cell phone. I'll be talking to somebody on a cell phone. I'll lose part of the conversation. When they come back, I'll go, what you were saying was very, very important. I lost the connection. I want to make sure that I got it right. Could you repeat what you said? And so, I apologize. I asked for permission to then have them say it again. And they love that, because it makes them feel good about, the process, that I actually care. But, I get conversations with people that could mean millions of dollars. And I wish I could get those millions, but I have conversations with people, and really, the comment I make, my response to it is going to impact, maybe win or lose. And so, I want to be really clear that I understood the question. Okay. So while they are speaking, and sometimes I'll stop them and ask them to repeat something, because it is important. So they are speaking, you are listening. You must remember. So when I'm doing these presentations, it's, I'm mostly lecture, until somebody starts asking questions, but it's mostly lecture. So, but I assure you, I go on a listing appointment, and Linda will tell you this, you're another guy. I mean, I sit down at the listing appointment, and I call it the listening appointment, because I'm there to listen. So I'm sitting there at the listening appointment, and doing more listening than I'm doing talking. And she's like, God, what happened to him? It's almost like he took a sedative or something, right? So it's important to remember that. I have to remember I coined that term there now, the listening appointment. Linda, I know you're not listening, even though you're on this webinar. So, okay, Teresa, you got that one? That's important, right? Okay, all right. So let them lead you through the house. So this is important. Remember one other thing I wanted to say while they're speaking. So I was teaching real estate at the colleges, and so my students were people who were, some of them were doing it for continuing ed, and others were doing it for getting a real estate license. And so, but I'm also teaching the lawyers at UCSD. And so Linda came, after attending a couple of my classes at MiraCosta, she came in and sat in on one of my classes where I'm talking to the lawyers, and she said, same thing. She said, I don't know who you are. You're like, you're not the guy that was just teaching this class over at MiraCosta. And I said, yeah. And she says, well, you're mean to these people. And I said, they're lawyers. And so I'm getting even. So, and I say that out of jest, because, unfortunately, a lot of my friends are lawyers. So, good people. But anyway, so I wanted to bring that up. But remember, you're like a chameleon. You change your stripes as you go to an appointment, as you learn what it is that's important to your client. And remember, when I'm writing things down on the listing input sheet, I'm also thinking in the back of my head, that those are the hot buttons for the seller, that I want to make sure I bring them up when we're sitting at the table, because normally the seller will determine where we're going to be signing things, because I don't live in that house, right? And so the seller will determine those things, but I'm listening with a lot of different ears when I'm filling out the listing input sheet, because those are going to be, and I get it from the seller, it'll be they had it listed with somebody else and it didn't sell. And so, they'll offer comments like, the last agent put in that it had these, vertical blinds or something. And so we think that's why it didn't sell. And I'm like, okay, so I know I need to pay attention to the vertical blinds, right? That kind of thing. I'm just using that as an example, but I have had sellers tell me why they think that the property didn't sell before. It's almost never their fault. fault, right? They almost never say because we were priced too high. Okay, that'll be our conversation later. Okay, everybody good with that? Okay, let them lead you through the house. Again, I've got my listing input sheet on my card, on my clipboard and all that kind of stuff. They're going to tell you where the signing room is. I'm glad I spelled that right. I thought I put singing. So the signing room, I call it the signing room. They're going to determine where they do business in the house, right? And where they meet the solar guy or where they meet the water softener guy or whatever. They're going to tell you where that is. And so you don't know where that is. And I almost never say, well, hey, let's get to the signing. It's like, I almost never say that. I let them close me. That's just my personality. My style is I let them take me through the house. They almost invariably, we do, again, a clockwise direction. They don't want to spend a lot of time in the master bedroom, right? What are we calling it? We're calling it primary room now or something. I don't know. I'm too old to have to change, but okay. But anyway, so they tend not to spend a lot of time in that room, but they spend a lot of time in the kitchen with you. They spend a lot of time he'll spend a lot of time in the garage with you. Normally, that's how, and I say normally only because it's just been my experience. Okay, but they're going to tell you, they're going to send you signals. You need to be listening with all the senses. Okay, all right. So you could end up in the kitchen. You could end up in the living room. You could end up in the dining room. The most important thing for you to remember is let them sit first. You never sit first, okay? Why? Well, first of all, it's respectful, right? And my experience is ladies first. I'm just a chauvinist from way back. I hold the door for the ladies. I pull the chair out. Linda to this day, it makes her insane because 11 years later, she's not allowed to touch door handles. Okay, because that's me. And so I'm very respectful of Linda. She went with her daughter to lunch one day up in Irvine, and the daughter parks the car, goes into the restaurant, and Linda's still sitting in the car. So the daughter comes out, Mom, are you okay? And Linda goes, oh God, I'm so used to Kevin opening the door. So anyway, I'm sorry, I had to throw that in there. I just think it was really cute. Okay, so let them sit first, all right? Avoid sitting on someone else's throne. This is a very bad thing. You sit in the decision maker's seat. They're going to be uncomfortable through the entire conversation. You may have just blitzed the whole thing. Okay, so let them sit first. Let them tell you where to sit. Now, I always make jokes about the fact, they want me to sit at the head of the table, and I always say, oh yeah, but I've learned in my experience that if I sit at the head of the table, the waitress gives me the bill, and they laugh, and they think it's funny, So I try to avoid sitting at the head of the table. But if they tell you to sit at the head of the table, sit at the head of the table. Okay, what'll normally happen is you'll have the alter ego on the other end of the table, right? That's usually a signal to you who the decision maker is whoever else is sitting at the other head of the table, okay, the other end of the head of the table, okay? But they're going to tell you, they'll tell you where to sit, but you have to let them sit first. I cannot tell you how important this is. And so again, read up on NLP, neuro-linguistic programming, watch the YouTube videos. There's a lot of really good stuff up there nowadays. In fact, all my videos, I've been loading all my videos up there. All of these are going to be up there. So now I'm just going to send you a link to our YouTube station, and you can go pull up whatever video you want. I'm not, having to, Dropbox share compressed files and stuff like that. I usually end up doing a lot of that. So now I just have it in my signature line. Look at my videos. Here they are, right? Just click on the link. It takes you right up to the YouTube video. You can watch them until the cows come home. I love putting them up there. So it's all good. Okay. So it'll also tell you who's in charge. Okay, don't sit on somebody else's throne. The seller only cares about two things. So we're going to switch gears here. We're going to talk about that actual conversation that you're going to have. The seller only cares about two things. You need to be prepared for this discussion. This is going to happen every time. Okay, how much are you going to get me? And how much are you going to charge me to get there? There's the only two things they care about. And where's all of that information is always on the listing agreement. Remember what I said earlier? The RLA, the listing agreement, is the very last form in my stack. That is the one they want to talk about. That is the one I don't want to talk about. By the time I get to that form, they don't care what they pay me. They really, because now I've earned my money. I've gone through the house. I've shown them how much I cared. I've been very detailed about things. We're having a nice conversation. We decide we love each other, right? And now they don't care because they know I'm worth it. That's just the start. And then we got more to talk about. So let's talk about how much you're going to get me. People buy on emotion, but they sell on fact. And so we want to remember that. We want to say that in a listing appointment. We want to say, people buy on emotion. We get all excited. We buy because, oh, I'm going to, put my gopher in that room, whatever. And we're going to sell on facts. So here are the facts. This is what the property's worth, and it's only worth this much. And we're going to talk about that. I brought this report with me. And so the reason I don't send them the report in advance is because then they start pulling up all these crazy websites that tell them how much their property is worth. And it's always worth more than I'm telling them it's worth. And it's not. I had an attorney who, probate attorney of all, works with dead people. Okay. And so that was an interesting interview. Interesting. I knew I had the listing ahead of time because he was referred to me by another attorney. And so, but he's sitting there, he's got his pillow estimate of how much this place is worth. It was way more than I said. I said it was worth 345, and he says, well, pillow says it's worth 425. And I said, oh, yeah, okay, well, they're off. And he says, but I want 455. And I'm like, we're going the wrong way, right? So, finally, ultimately, I let him have his 445 or 455 or whatever it was. Do you know that the minute that he really got into a panic when he absolutely had to sell it, he dropped the price down to 395, and I said, it's too late. That's not going to do it either. I probably could have gotten you that at one point, but now you waited too long at the higher price. That's why nobody's even showing the property. Okay, so now we're gonna have to talk. I ended up selling it for 345, which is exactly what I said it would sell for, but he got to a point where he had to sell rather than he could have gotten more money if he had been, listened to me in the first place, right? So you have that little curve, that bell curve thing you show people that says, this is, pricing is so important. If you price it right in the beginning, you'll sell it. But if you price it too high, you're probably gonna end up selling it for less than you could have gotten if you priced it right in the beginning. Okay, so there's a graph in the SDMLS presentation, CMA presentation wizard that'll do that, and that's how we explained it. Okay, all right. Present your visuals. And again, that would be a good example of a visual. Present the things that you have that are going to justify how much the property is worth. So they're asking you, how much are you going to get me? But they're really saying, how much is my place worth? They're prepared for an argument because they think the real estate agent's trying to talk them way down because, then they get paid faster. That should never be a concern. All right. But I'm going to have all my visuals. I'm going to have all my stuff in front of me. I'm going to present my rationale. I'm going to say, this is why we sell things the way that we do. And I always ask them the question, what is the appraiser going to say? Back yourself out of this appointment. Let's go up to 30,000 feet. What do appraisers use? And I teach appraisal. So what do appraisers use to determine value of property? Well, on a residential home, which is market data approach, they're going to use other comparable properties in the area that have sold recently, right? And so we're going to look at those numbers ourselves, and I'm going to show you what those are. And now I'm talking about fact. This is in fact what the appraiser uses to determine value. So I ask you the question, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, what would an appraiser say? They don't care you raised your kids in this house. They don't care that you put this pretty little wall ornament on there that it doesn't affect the value at all. They care about the location. They care about the amenities in the area, the ocean view. They care about those things. They don't care about, you raised Johnny in this place. Okay, they don't care. I'm sorry. It's a fact-based analysis. It's just the way that it is. So what do they base their opinion on? And again, I just told you what that was. So remember, and the sellers will tell you this, the seller prices the property. Well, yeah, they do, but the buyer determines the ultimate sales price. So the seller picks the price to market the property for, but the buyer picks the price that the property is going to sell for. So, and hopefully we can find a meeting point in the middle between those two things, okay? So do your list price versus sales price narrative. So talk about the fact that, your listings sell, within a couple of dollars of what you listed them for. So, I know other brokers, and I look up their data, right? You could do it in the MLS. Here they list it for $100,000 and they sell it for $65,000. And so, and I see that again and again and again. And so, the rationale behind that is they take the listing at any price and then they work the reduction all the way through the listing period. So is that what you want, or do you want to price it right to sell it right away? I always ask the question, how many more payments do you want to make? Okay, so I know Linda wrote an offer on a property that she really wanted to have, and the seller was way overpriced, and so Linda ended up not buying the house, for a lot of other reasons. Linda ended up not buying the house. She bought another house down the street. Linda just likes to buy houses, God love her. And so, that property ultimately sold for how much the seller wanted for it, the first property, but they made payments for 9 months. And so now I'm doing the math, and I don't think they made up for the wait time that they had. 9 payments, and that was almost the difference between what Linda offered and what the buyer ultimately paid. So does that make sense? Okay, so make sure you got a good analysis on that. Pricing strategy. Buyers looking, Mr. and Mrs. Seller, buyers looking in increments of $50,000. So let's price it. So if you want to sell your house for $500,000, let's price it for $499. Not let's price it for $501, because you're going to miss everybody looking up to 500. Right. So I never want to put that price just over that lip. I want it to be underneath the lip. And frankly, we'll talk about pricing it high, pricing it low in just a second. If you price it, here we go, we're already there. So if you price the property too high, and I had this conversation with the seller, if you price the property too high, then you sit. And I stop and I go, you sit. and then now their brain is going, what did that mean, right? Half the time is because we finally got a moment to think about what you just said. Okay, and by the way, when they ask a question, it probably means you're talking too fast. And I know I'm guilty of it from time to time. Obviously my webinars, I'm going fast because I don't have enough time. But when they ask me a question, I stop. Okay, the Indian walking stick. I stop and I listen. And I let them finish the question. And I think about the response. I don't just blurt it out, because I want them to think that I took their question seriously. And then I give them my response. And then I wait for them to respond. And eye contact at all times. Okay. So if you price the property too high, you sit. Okay, and wait for the market to come to you. Now, folks, I'm going to tell you to use this script, okay? And you wait for the market to come to you. If you price the property low, you create your own market. And I think that's really important, right? I didn't get this from any other speakers or anything like that. I just believe that if you price it low, now not too low, now you don't want to price $1 million property for 100 grand, right? Because there's a lot of things that can go wrong with that. And plus you've got to fight with the seller, because they're going, I'll never sell it for that. Well, we want to sell it, right? Okay, so if I price it, if it's a $500,000 property and I price it for $450,000, do you think we're going to get a lot of offers? Yes. Okay. So how much do you think, and I'm pretty good at multiple offers, how much do you think we're going to sell it for? Probably going to sell it for $525,000, $535,000. So more than it's worth, but just because somebody's going to want to get it because they want to win something. But if it's worth 500 and I price it for 550, we're going to sit. Does that make sense? And so, and you ask the question, don't be afraid of that. Ask them the question. That's okay, right? So, obviously I'm fairly assertive about, what I'm saying. You just develop your own style, okay? Develop your own style, but I want you to get the listing, but I don't want you to get something that's going to waste your time for 6 months, okay? All right, discuss other properties in the marketplace. And so I say that because I want to talk about that CMA thing, okay? So I'm going to talk about the active listings. So I'm going to pull up the CMA from the MLS. The active, I always use the actives, the pendings, the expires, and the solds. My active listings, these are your current competition. These are the properties that buyers are looking at when they're making a decision whether to write an offer on yours or on the others. And so you'll notice that where you want to price yours is above where everybody else is. And so what that translates to is others are going to sell before yours is. Now, maybe that's a good strategy for you if you've got time to wait, but you are not going to be the first sale. If you're priced up here and the other ones are selling for down here and they're priced down here, those are going to have to sell first before yours is going to become worth anything. And that became the story with the property that Linda turned down because the seller was just unreasonable, and they sat and they waited a long time, and they finally did sell the house, right? There's a lid for every pot, right? And so they did sell the house ultimately, but when they sold it, they had made 9 payments, and I don't know. I think the payments on it were like 8,000 a month or something. So I think they probably they covered that gap pretty quick. Okay, so active. These are your current competition. Pending. So I'm just looking at the sheet. Pending. This is the price it took to get an offer. Okay, that's not necessarily the price that it's going to close for. But what you see in the MLS is the pending. That was the price it was listed for when the offer came in. I tell the seller that. I say that's how much it was listed for. That's not what it's going to sell for. Down here, we're going to talk about what they sell for down here. But active, that's your competition. Those are the ones that are going to sell before yours. Pending, those are the prices that it took to get an offer. There's a clue. Okay. Expired, this is the price that was too high, right? And did not sell the property. Do you want to, which column do you want to be in? Okay, because the final one is sold, and that's what the ready, willing, and able buyer was willing to pay. And so when I look at my comps and I put the emphasis on that, and I say to the seller, I say, which column do you want? I've got 4 columns: active, pending, expired, and sold. Which column do you want to be in? Folks, that's one of the best closes you could ever make on a listing appointment. And the seller's going to say, well, I want to be in the sold column. Okay, but I don't want that price. I want the expired price, because the expired price is the highest price on the whole sheet, isn't it? And I always tell them, I say, I agree with you. I want that price too. That's my goal. My goal is to get you that price. But I can't convince somebody to buy something for more than it's worth. And so, I had a seller, I had a listing, and this goes back a long time ago. The property was, I told the seller, the property's worth $97,000. Okay, and that's how much it was actually worth. Now you can imagine the seller says to me, "We're not in a hurry. No big deal. Don't worry about it. No pressure. We want to price it for $99,000. Well, if you sell it, you sell it, but if not, that's how much we want for it. So we put it on the market. I told the seller, I said, you're overpriced. Now, believe it or not, that was a big spread. $97,000 to $99,000 was a huge spread. Okay. So the seller assured me that not a problem, not in a hurry, whatever it sells, that's fine. Okay. So $97,000. The next day they call me on the phone. How come you haven't sold the house yet? I'm like, huh? I said, we just had this conversation. You hear what the worst part was? I lived across the street, right? So I'm in a subdivision. This is back in 1984. Oh my God, I can't believe I remember. So back in the name was Johnson. I think it was Bert and Ernie. I don't know, but I can't remember their first names. But their name was Johnson. I remember that. They lived directly across the street from me. They could look in my dining or my kitchen window, right? And I'm like, oh my God. I mean, I was miserable. So 97,000. How come I haven't sold a house yet? And then the next day they call me up and say, how come you haven't shown our house yet? And I said, well, I'm not getting any calls on it because you're overpriced. You priced it for $99,000. Yeah, I know, but they can bring us an offer, can't they? Folks, have you heard this before? Right? Well, they could bring us an offer. We could counter. Like, it's too high to get an offer. Why don't we just price it for $1.2 million? It's like, it's a 99. It's not even a $99,000 house. It's a $97,000 house. If I tell you it changed my life. Remember what I said before about some listings you don't want to get? That was one I wish I never took. So bottom line, the day after that, nobody from your office has even shown the house. Every day this went on, there was something going on. It got so bad that, and of course I'm gone working all day, right? I'm in real estate. I'm working all day. And so at nighttime, our houses were, there was a slope, a sloping hill. And so literally, and I know some of you won't understand what I'm saying, but I would drive back at night and I would turn the headlights off of the car and I would put the car in neutral and I would coast down the street. And my garage door opener, I took the light bulb out of the garage door opener so that they couldn't see me come home. And I would literally time it so that I would coast up in without hitting the brakes until I got into it. And then here's the garage door coming down. If I tell you, oh God, ultimately I sold the house, but it took a while. But I just didn't want, because they would see me come home and then they would call me right away. And it was like, this is back before cell phones, back before even pagers at that point. But we had answering machines, but I'd get, answer the question or message number 1, how come you haven't sold my house yet? Message number 2, when are you going to show my house? And I got this whole list of things that are going on. If you don't think I have stories, oh my God, it made me insane. But literally, I took the bulb out of the garage door opener so that it wouldn't light up so they couldn't see me come home. Okay, but I coast down the drive. There's something wrong with that. Okay, that was earlier in my career. Remember, I got my license at 79. In 84, I'm taking a stupid listing. Okay, all right. Okay, so that's what I tell them. which category do you want to be in? I've got 4 of them right here. Which one is yours? Right? Active. Okay. Well, we can sit. All right. Pending. All right. Well, at least I got an offer. And remember, your actives are usually higher than your pendings, because the pendings are the ones that went before the actives did. And then your expired listings are always the highest price. The sold ones are never the highest price. The sold ones are always the lowest price. Okay. So they don't want the sold one, but they know that subconsciously they want to sell the property. And so which one gets you your sale? And so these are the ones where it actually closes. This is how much the buyer is willing to pay. Does everybody understand that? Great conversation to have with the seller, a realistic conversation. All right. So now it's time to close on the price. Okay. That's what you're doing now. But you got to know your scripts. And so the second part of our equation is, how much are you going to charge me to get there? Now, I always love that part, right? Because, here's the rule. The rule is you get whatever you want. You tell the seller what you charge for something, whatever that number is. We're not going to discuss averages or minimums or anything like that. We're not going to get into a Sherman antitrust violation. Okay. All right. So, but how much are you going to charge me? So you follow your broker's advice on how much you should charge for a listing. Your broker's required by law to establish a minimum commission for the office, not to be discussed outside of the office. Okay. So we definitely don't get into that kind of conversation, but you have to, your broker probably wants you to charge. Now, if you're doing loans and sales, sometimes the lender will not charge anything on the listing side of things because they're going to make up for it when you buy the next house or whatever their formulas are. I don't know. I don't do loans, but again, your broker has to establish a minimum. And you need to follow your broker's advice. Okay. All right. So in our office, our minimum is X. We have an agent in our office who takes all of his listings at 10%. And I tell people that, they go, you've got to be kidding. That's against the law. No, I think I know it's not against the law. It's what he gets. He goes on the listing appointment. He says, here's how much I charge. He gets 10%. Okay. He just does. And he sells them, and he sells them for more money than they could have ever gotten because he pays the other agent, and everybody's happy. But at the end of the day, the seller usually makes up for more than the difference in the commission. All right. So just whatever it is, whatever that number is, you need to listen to your broker, follow your broker's advice. And if it's 6% or 5% or 4% or 10% or 12% or whatever, it's the conversation that goes with the seller. And my experience is that if you're getting a higher commission, you're probably putting more effort into the sale as well. But I think you're probably also able to get the seller more money for the house than other people would have gotten. And a lot of that just comes down to the negotiation between the buyer and the buyer's agent and the seller's agent. Literally, maybe that person's a better negotiator. I don't know. Well, I do know in some cases where I just know they're masters. So the negotiation is where all the money is. And that's usually, you'd be thinking about that. But I had an agent that made a great comment to me once. They said, you need to learn how to earn your commission. And so earn your money, don't give it away. And so, if we have an agent that takes a listing for less than they're worth, then I always tell them, I say, well, now you have nowhere to go. If there gets to be a battle between the buyer and the seller, and there's a couple of nickels on the table, and you have nowhere to go because you gave away the money when you took the listing. So think about those things. So how much are you going to charge me to get there? All right, that's our question. Don't be afraid of the question. It's okay. They feel like they have to answer it or have to ask it. They're going to, right? I went on a listing appointment out in Scripps Ranch. I took 2 of my students from Miracosta with me, just kind of shadow along. And you know what? It was we were there for 2 hours and 45 minutes. It wasn't a really long appointment. And I'm going through the whole place, going through my whole shtick, doing all that. And then finally we're all standing around the countertop in the kitchen, and Mrs. Seller turns to me and says, well, I guess we should ask you a question. And I go, what's that? And they go, how much are you going to charge us? And I said, well, I'm not going to charge. And they've already signed the listing agreement, right? It said right on there, I think that one was 6% or 7% or something like that. And they'd already signed the listing agreement. And so I said, I refuse to charge you more than I charge anybody else. And they go, oh, okay. And I left with my 2 girls behind me, and they got outside. They go, what just happened? I said, we took a listing. And they said, well, what about that question? And I said, well, I knew they were going to ask it. At some point, they're going to ask it. And I responded, because it was just the appropriate thing at the time. I said, I refuse to charge you more than I charge anybody else. And they were happy with the answer. You know, you need to be good on your feet. I had a listing in Del Mar where the property was currently listed with another broker. Remember that you may not solicit the listing of another broker, but the seller may solicit you. And so, and the seller in this case happened to also be an attorney. And so they called me on the phone and they said, come on down, we want you to list our house. I get there, I said, you've got it listed currently with, you know, this other guy who happened to be a friend of mine, unfortunately. And I said, what's going on with that? And they said, well, you know, we're in a lawsuit with the buyer. We had that agent sold the house, but then the buyer heard some kind of a rumor that Del Mar was going to build a fire station across the street. And so they decided they didn't want to buy the house. Well, they'd already removed all their contingencies. They still decided they didn't want to buy the house. And so now our dispute is really only over the commissions, I'm sorry, over the deposit. So there's no list pendants or anything like that. The lawyers, pretty smart lawyers all the way around, you know, said we're just going to litigate over the deposit. Who's going to get the deposit? Ultimately, the seller got the deposit, but okay. So seller's pretty good. Anyway, I'm sitting with the seller. I have my business partner with me. And the seller said, you know, I don't care. This is where this comment came from. How much you're going to get me, and how much you can charge me to get there. I got that from this guy who's a national speaker, and so you know, he says, you know, I'm there with my listing presentation packet. Remember the packet? You know, this thing's like this thick, right? I'm all excited about showing them diagrams and circles and arrows and pictures and glossies and all kinds of stuff. And he turns to me, and they're dressed to the nines. Okay, so I'm like, this is kind of a weird way to show up for a listing appointment. And so they said, we only have two questions. How much are you going to charge us, or how much are you going to get us, and how much are you going to charge us to get there? And I said, well, the price you're under contract with right now, I think is a good price. And they said, well, how much are you going to charge us? And I said, well, I'm charging, I don't remember if it was 6 or 7. I don't remember what the number was, but I charge this. And they said, oh, and I said, well, how much is the other guy charging you? And they said, well, he was doing us a favor. And I said, and they said he was only charging us 4%. And I don't know where it came from, folks. I just said, well, that didn't sell it, did it? I don't know where that came from. Okay. And then my partner's looking at me and she's like, where the hell did that come from? And so, you know, later on, I'm like, oh, yeah, that sounded great, didn't it? Okay. So, well, that didn't sell it, did it? So kind of keep that in the quiver of arrows, you know, for when you go on an expired listing appointment, they're already used to being listed. So that part's pretty good. And so no matter what, how much did the other agent charge, right? And you ask the question. And so it's, you always want to come back with a number that's higher. You know, right? So that didn't sell it, did it? And so, you know what? I got my 6 or 7%. I don't even remember what it was. I sold this place in like 6 days. Okay. Great money. And it was $1.1 million. So it wasn't a small deal. Okay. And so, you know, we'd hold open houses and you know, I'd have 75 people through it, you know, and so don't be afraid to ask, but be prepared. They're going to, because in their brain, they've been taught that they have to ask the question. So be prepared for it. It's okay. And then be prepared to earn it, right? And so, you know, I always say they think that they're supposed to. They don't know what else to do. It's not that they're causing any harm. They're not intimidating you. They're not calling you out on anything. They just don't know what else to do. Remember, you're selling houses every day. They're selling these once every 3 to 5, 7 years in San Diego. Okay. Most times it's really just a question. So that's why, you know, my flippant response was really knowing that was probably their only shot. And it was. They signed the listing agreement. They went off to their dinner and he did I'm sure he did a wonderful presentation. And I went back, started inputting the listing in the MLS. And like I said, I sold it 6 days later. So don't be afraid of the question. Be prepared on how to answer it. And so sometimes those answers will come to you like in the night kind of thing. And so, you know, I used to worry, well, what if they asked me to cut my commission? And then it's like, you know, they're going to ask. So no. And so sometimes they'll say, well, will you cut your commission? And I'll say no. And then I'll go on to the next question. I'll go on to the next thing. And they just don't know what else to do. They just keep going, right? And so you're leading, you're in charge, okay, that kind of thing. But they're going to ask the question. So be prepared. There are tons of scripts out there. I know Mike Ferry used to publish all of his in a book, and then he stopped doing that. There are companies out there. I was management for the Red People. They bought a book, 750 pages. pages of you know, what to say if they say this. I remember my little brother, who's like 65, he said, you know, we're always afraid. This was like 50 years ago. He says to me, he says, we're always afraid that somebody's going to ask us a question and we're not going to know the answer to it. You know, at this point in life, I find that I can make up stuff as I go, truthfully, of course, right? But you know, I've gotten pretty good on my feet, and you'll get that way too. But it's going to take going on a couple of appointments. Okay, all right. So most times it's really just a question. You know, they're not vested in the outcome. Just remember that it might be a stall. They might be asking you the question to slow you down. And so I want you to keep that in your head, because sometimes they're not really asking because they're concerned about something. They're asking only because, you know, they're still processing what you just said a minute ago. Is everybody okay with that? I mean, it's kind of an important concept. You know, they're not your adversary. You're working with them to get them as much as you possibly can get for the house. And then later on, when you know, they do a price reduction, they lower the price 100,000, and they say, and we want you to participate too, and we want you to lower your commission. Your answer is, you just did. And they go, what do you mean? Well, you lowered the price 100 grand, you just cut my commission, right? Because my commission was based on sales price, and so you just lowered my commission right there. So, you know, we should have a whole class on commissions. Again, not setting a commission or fixing a commission or coming to any kind of an agreement on commission. We're not going to do that, right? Clearly, I know that's, you know, where to stay away from that. But you know, those are questions that you are already concerned about, and maybe I should write a book. That should be it. But it's sometimes, again, it's nothing more. It's just a question. That's all. They didn't mean anything by it. Present your value proposition. Differentiate yourself. Remember, distinguish, differentiate yourself from the rest of the pack. What makes you different? Okay, and so let's talk about that. I used to do this thing. You know, I was with the Gold Coach back many years ago, and so we had this little thing called the 21 Things We'll Do for You. Okay, so I would go down to, I don't even know if Alpha Graphics is still in business, but I would go down and I would type a newsletter. This is back with a thing called a typewriter. Some of you don't know what a typewriter is, but it's kind of like a keypad, except that it's, you know, it actually had keys that went forward. Anyway, I think I still have the original typewriter, but bottom line is, I would type up my newsletter, but then I'll also do the top 10 things I'm going to do for you, and I would top 21 things. And so I would put that on. I would have Alpha Graphics printed on paper that looked like, you know, parchment, you know, like the Dead Sea Scrolls, right? So it made it look really official and all that kind of stuff. And then I would take that to the appointment. I'm going to tell you, this is one of your best closes. Okay, I would take it to the appointment, and I would sign it in front of them. Okay, and then I would give it to them. They go, oh my God, oh, this is so cool. You know, but these are all the things I'm going to help you know, you help your buyer get a loan. I'm going to show your property. You know, I'm going to hold open houses, you know, hokey stuff, right? But, you know, we take for granted a lot of times the things that we do. And when we minimize those values, they will too. And so we don't want to minimize. Those are big things. You know, you're about to cut out a weekend that you're going to have to spend when you could be spending it at the beach. You could be spending it with your kids, but you're going to cut out a whole weekend of your time to try to help the seller sell the house by holding this overpriced listing open, right? So this is why, you know, I would always write down, these are all the things I'm going to do for you. And if you want a really good clue, go to paragraph number, is it 5 of the new BRDC, the broker's obligations and responsibilities, and just type them out. I make my law students do that. I make them go to that paragraph, and I make them, you know, we do it in word wrap so it'll fit, but I have them stack it, you know, number 1, number 2, number 3, number 4, number 5, and it's pages long. And so they do that, and then they come back to me, and this is, you know, I'm having lawyers do this, right? And they come back to me and they go, wow, we had no idea what you did. That's amazing how much realtors do. And I said, yeah, I mean, that's why we put it in the form, but nobody ever reads it. But when I had you stack it, not only could you see it, but you also, when you write it down, you own it, right? And so they said, that's amazing. Now, folks, if the attorneys are saying this, what do you think your client's going to say when you don't have them do it? I don't think. You do it, put it on a piece of paper, stack it. I have stacks of these things from my law students, the people that are in the program have sent me these things because I grade them on it. And so, you know, here they are, right? But they put them in a Word document, whatever. And then they you know, on a listing appointment, I'm going to take it with me. I'm going to have them sign it, right? Because I want them to know this is what I do. Okay, the listing agreement, obviously different paragraph. Okay, all right. So that being said, take notes from your listing agreement. Well, remember what I said earlier? When I'm on that, when we're going doing the clockwise circle around the house, I'm listening to what the seller's telling me, because they're probably not just giving me, what box to check. They're also giving me information that's important to them later. I want to make sure I don't make those same mistakes. Like for example, we don't want to have the property shown on Sunday morning between 8 and 10. And we told the other agent that, and people are coming in at 8 o'clock, 9 o'clock. And that's a private time for us. We go to church, we do whatever. And so I know I'm not going to make that mistake, right? I'm going to be really clear in the MLS. I'm pretty confident about my ability to input the listing, but listen to them when they're telling you things. Sometimes it's not the words they use, it's the way that they say it. Okay. Again, back to that NLP stuff. Okay, so prepare for the objections. So and so will charge me less. I had a lot of fun putting this together, by the way. So and so will charge me less. Your response, and they probably should. Now think about that for a minute. It's kind of a backhanded compliment, right? So it's like, and they probably should charge less. And the seller's looking at me, and I go, they have to compete with me based on my price. They can't compete with me based on my service. And that is a great close. If you think about it, they can't compete with me on service, so they have to cut their fee to be lower than mine. And no, I'm not going to cut my fee. What part of my service do you want me to cut out? Because, I charge for this. Okay, so, I'm not going to give you an a la carte, but if you don't want me to, put a lockbox on your house, you only put a sign in the yard, then maybe I'll charge you an extra $50. If you're going to negotiate on commissions, by the way, you never want to do it in percentages. You always want to do it in dollars. And so, because the percentages will ultimately end up being larger dollar amounts, so you just want to do it. I'll give you $5,000 worth of Baby Ruth bars or something. That kind of thing. Okay. All right. So anyway, I had fun putting this together. Remember the old saying, and I always say this to the client. I always say, remember the old saying: you get what you let them finish it. All right. You follow me? I do this in every appointment. Remember, you get what you, and they say, pay for. And I let them finish it, because when they finish it, they own it. Okay. And so now they go, oh yeah, that's right. I remember this time we did this and this, and oh God, they gave us a great deal, but it was horrible, right? I just rented a car because I had to go take a road trip, and Linda won't let me drive her car. And put miles on it, kind of thing. So I go and I rent a car. I rent a car, from I'm not going to tell you who it is, but I'm furious. But anyway, so I got I have this service that tells me what, the rental prices are, the different, the automotive rental agencies and stuff like that. So I picked the lowest price. I got the lowest car. I mean, the guy says to me, he says, it's brand new. He hands me the keys. I get out there. It's got 11,300 miles on it. Is that brand new? Right? It smells like, smoke. I'm allergic to smoke, but I had no choice because my appointment is literally 2 hours away, and I had maybe 2 hours to get there. And so, smelled like smoke. It was, I turned the car on. The message light comes on, says needs maintenance. And I'm like, this is just not going well, right? I almost went back and said, give me a Ferrari or something. But anyway, I took the lowest car. The lowest price, and I definitely got the lowest car. Okay, so I'm sure you have 100 stories like that. You need to, just say you get what you, and let them finish it. You get what you pay for. Okay, all right, and they know that. They know that. I hear that the commission market, I put that in parentheses so that you would know I'm talking about the commissions. I hear that the market is at X. And so, I always wondered about that. How can a seller tell me how much commissions are, right? How can they tell me that? Think about it for a second. How would they know how much is the other sellers have their listing agreements for? They don't have any way of knowing, right? I mean, I don't know. How do they know? Well, because somebody came in on an appointment, and I ask them, I say, how do you know that? Right? And then I say to them, I say, it is a violation of our rules, a violation of our MLS rules to share agent printouts with non-subscribers. So the MLS doesn't have members, it has subscribers. So our rules say we can share full printouts with other subscribers, but sharing them with a non-subscriber is $1,000 penalty. And so I tell the seller that. I say, well, how do you know that? and then I say it's a violation of our rules to share that information, right? And so then if they're going to break the rules now, and I always put that in there, right? And I don't finish that sentence either. But if they're going to break the rules now, I don't know, what do you think you're going to get later? Okay. They'll break the rules and maybe they break them with you. I mean, I don't know. Okay. So nothing replaces the boots on the ground, the real estate agent in the community. And so a lot of times, like I said, I'll go out on that appointment, but I'm going to show you my trick here in a second because I hate to run out of time. So your response, you're only seeing what the seller's agent is paying the buyer's agent. You don't know. We don't have a rule that says that we split our commissions equally. Some sellers think we all pool our money and then just give it up by whoever's breathing, at the end of a period of time. So it's rarely half. I mean, I know a lot of agents who take listings for a certain figure and pay less than half to the other side. Linda bought a house. The agent was paying 2.5% commission during the course of the escrow, the transaction. The information was given to us that the total listing price was 6%. The other agent had taken the listing at 6%, paid us 2.5%. The MLS said 2.5%, and they kept 3.5%. It happens all the time. Okay, so don't be assuming just because you see 2.5 in the MLS and you tell the seller that, just because you see 2.5 doesn't mean it's a 5% listing. Okay, where you see 3, it doesn't mean it's a 6% listing. I've seen it go the other way. I've seen 3% in the MLS and the seller's agent took a point. That's it. So there's no rule that says you have to share, but you do have to tell people if you've cut a break to the seller at the time of listing that if you bring in the offer, you'll give them a reduction in the commission. You do have to tell everybody that. That's a CVR. That's a variable rate commission. Okay, so there's no requirement seller's agent split. Whoops, let me get my window here. The commission equally with the buyer's agent. There's no rule. Okay, just is. And in fact, that conversation is a commission breaking question. It's a antitrust question. Okay, all right. So and so has a lot of listings. Okay, your response: I promised you personal service, right? Would you rather work with a real estate professional that you hired? Now that question, you're sitting there going, well, what is it? Where's that going, right? Would you rather work with a real estate professional that you hired? Or maybe get calls on a Monday from an assistant making excuses for why your house hasn't sold. So a lot of times these agents that are carrying 50, 60, 70 listings, they have hired people to call on Mondays and tell the sellers, here's what's going on, right? Here's how many showings we had. Here's what the market's doing, again, work the reduction, that kind of thing. So I always ask them, I say, well, would you rather work with me? Or would you rather work with somebody's assistant? I do transactions all the time. The other people disappear. And it's like, where do you go? Right. And so it's like, I'd like to work with you. Okay. So because, and you're going to get personal attention from me. I don't carry 50 listings at a time on purpose. And part of the reason is because my listings sell right away. I price them to sell and they sell right away. And so, so we're going to have a good relationship. I'm sorry, it's not going to be a year. It'll probably be 3 months, maybe at the most, but some of my relationships with sellers don't last more than a month. So, and I put it all that in a positive light. Okay. So know your scripts. When you're dealing with a seller, we refer to the structure as a house. When you're dealing, and that desensitizes them. I want to desensitize them from the sale. When we're dealing with the buyer, we're looking for a home that sensitizes them for the sale. Okay, because we want them to be sensitive about the sale. What are the most important things that you are looking for in a real estate agent? I always ask the seller that. And so this, I say to the seller, were you aware that not all real estate agents are realtors? And they're looking at you and they go, I say to them, let's look at a standard form that realtors use in our industry to explain the difference. A standard form that realtors use in our industry to explain the difference. You see what I'm saying here? Now watch, I'm going to show you the form. Oops, don't log me out. Oh gosh, okay, hang on a second. It's going to log me out. Well, it might be good. Let's go to templates. To log me out. This program. Okay, all right, let's close it. Screen sharing is stopped. Let me pull up my window again. I apologize that I spent too much time. The program has a ticker on it that logs you out after, I'm not sure if it's 20 minutes. Anyway, I didn't get to it in time. So, okay, we're going to go ahead and log in really quick. I want to show you, this is my #1 closer on a listing appointment. I will pull this form up. We've got a template, obviously, for purposes of listing appointments and stuff. So when I click on my templates and zip forms, can you all see this? my screen is working way faster than the other screen is. Phone exit. Oh, you can't see it because I haven't shared that screen yet. Let's go to that screen. So here's my template screen. These are all the templates that we have. So I'm going to go to my seller listing template. I'm going to click on that. And then inside of that, I'm going to look for my RA form. And so, because this is the form I wanted to show you. So RA, where did it go? Where did it go? I'm looking here. Yeah, here at the bottom. Oh, for crying out loud. I know it's in here. Okay, you're gonna play hardball with me. I will show that RA. I've got some good stuff in here. 7 reasons to work with a realtor, choosing questions to ask when choosing a realtor. So I'm going to bet my RA is in here, but it's called the RA form. It's the realtor acknowledgement form. And it explains the difference between a realtor and a licensee. And I'm a little worried that it's not in there. Is it in here? I'm normally ready for you. I had it already, and then guess what happened? So you're going to tell me I don't have it in there? There's no way. Realtor acknowledgement. Where'd it go? Huh. Okay. Oh, that's wild. Oh, that's sample letters. We don't want sample letters. We want this one. And then we're going to go down here to, there it is right there. It's not in the program. That's weird. It's in all my programs. So, okay. So let's take a look at this form really quick. The realtor's acknowledgement form. I'm going to pull it up. So notice that I'm going to go to full screen. Notice that on the form it says this form is for realtor use only. Use of this form by a non-realtor is in violation of B&P Code 10177. Penalties may result in the violator's real estate license being suspended or revoked or denied issuance for new applicants. Sounds pretty powerful, doesn't it? And so I tell the seller there is a difference, right? There is a difference between a licensee and a realtor. There are 435,000 licensees in the state of California. Only 200,000 of them subscribe to NAR's written code of ethics. And then they go to page 2, and then you show them all this, and then you sign it. You're the only one who signs it, right? And you sign it in front of them. So let me pull us back to our PowerPoint. Let's take a look at a standard form. Everybody that's a realtor uses this form. It's a standard form. And then, so what does the seller say? Or I say, you can see that it's a crime to call yourself a realtor when in fact you are not. And so the seller says, wait, I've never seen that form before. Now you got the seller scratching their head, right? It's got back to my Dead Sea Scrolls, right? So no one has ever shown it to us or to me, okay? And so it's like, all right. And I say, okay, I know not everybody wants you to know that there's a difference. Now, I'm not saying that the other people aren't realtors. I don't know who was here, right? I don't know. Okay, they could very well be, all right, realtor members. But now I've created a doubt in the seller's mind, and now they're thinking, well, wait a minute, I want to work with someone who subscribes to a written code of ethics, and nobody's ever talked about that before. And now I'm seeing there's a form which I've never seen before, and apparently it's a standard form. Does everybody see what I'm saying? This is going to be one of your best closers, all right? And if you want help with that, send me an email. We'll talk together, and I'll explain it to you even deeper. I could spend a half an hour on that form. I mean, because it's a great form, all right? But I use it. It's the very first form I ever put in front of the client, and I sign it in front of them, and I hand it to them, and I don't have to have a copy. Not everybody wants you to know there's a difference between having a real estate license and abiding by a written code of ethics. There is a difference, okay? All right, so sign it in front of them, give them a copy. Only you sign it, they don't. And I always say, see, look, no blood, right? I will hold my signing hand up. I go, look at that. No bleeding here, right? And what's my point? My point is we're going to be doing things like this today. We're going to be signing things and nobody's going to get hurt. Okay. All right. Okay. So, I could be very charming. Okay. Linda says I'm very charming. Okay. And then I go into my AD form, my agency disclosure form. Okay. And so California law, and I say this to the seller, California law requires, and you can say Civil Code 2079 if you want, that I disclose the concept of agency before we do anything else. And so what does that look like? Well, I go back up here and I look for my AD form, or I can look for my listing agreement. If you see it before I do, let me know. This is, by the way, our template for sellers. So if you want a copy of this, send me an email. I'll get it for you. But this is my agency disclosure. So I always have, by law, I have to disclose the concept of agency before we do anything else. That's why CAR put this as the very first form in their mini template. Okay, is everybody okay with that? I go through the, here's 2079. Again, I do trial work on this, so I might know this one pretty well. Make sure you're using the current form, folks. Make sure you're using the 1221 version, not the 1018 version. And then the version before that, I think, was 20 years earlier, right? We don't do that many revisions, but CAR staff actually went and had the code changed. And for a lot of good reasons. For example, it used to be called the listing agent. Now it's the seller's agent. We're writing it in plain English. It used to be called the selling agent. Now it's the buyer's agent. Why? Because that's how we talk, right? But then it also says, here's what happens when we have dual agency. Okay, so these are things that I go through the form. I show, I don't give them a class on it, but I definitely go through the form with them so that they understand that there is a difference here. Okay, so I'm building an arsenal with the seller that we're going to be buds. We're going to make this happen. Okay, so so this is not a contract. It says right up across the top of the form, it's a disclosure. Okay, so you're gauging with them right now how you're doing. How is this going to work? Are we friendly? Are they going to sign things, or are they have not built rapport yet? Okay. All right. So we're going to do a lot of these today. All right. So then you go in, you do your warnings. I'm not going to pull all these up. Your cyber crimes advisory, your wire fraud advisory, your local area disclosures. That's a San Diego form. Your statewide buyer and seller advisory, market conditions advisory, water conserving plumbing fixtures, environmental hazards disclosures. These are all the things that I'm going to be giving them. Those are all my warnings. Okay. But be prepared, present them one at a time. Again, I'm buying time here, right? Now, I've spent 2 hours on this presentation. We're almost done. We're wrapping up. But at the same time, when I'm on that listing appointment, this is not an in and out done, done appointment. We're going to spend some time going over some stuff. Okay. And like my former business partner said, they'll sign anything to get rid of you. I'll wear them down. And by the time I get to that listing document, that they don't know what to do. They just, oh yeah, let's just sign it. We need to go eat, something like that. So do your disclosures. I always like to do the disclosures first. Okay. And the argument is, are they statutory or are they contractual? And I just did this webinar last week. So if you want, you can go to the page. I'm going to show you, by the way, where my page is, and then you can go look at all these things yourself. And please like and like it, I guess they say, and subscribe. I learned how to do it, literally a couple of weeks ago. So I'm very proud of myself. So anyway, statutory versus contractual. Do your statutory disclosures first, your TDS, your NHD, your FHDS, your Mello-Roos, your methamphetamine contamination, if appropriate. Then do your contractual disclosures next. Statutory disclosures, you got to know the difference between the two, because you can make a really hard case for knowing what you're doing if you understand the differences. Okay, your contractual disclosures are going to be your SPQ, your FERPTA, your SLIC form, which I probably shouldn't have in there because it's really not even a contract. It's between the seller and the seller tells you what their loans look like and stuff like that. The SPQA is an SDAR form. So is the SLIC form, by the way, the seller listing information checklist. Two really good forms. And then the listing agreement. It's the last one. The last form the client's going to sign. I don't even put it in front of them until the very end, because that's all they want to talk about. But at the time they get there, they don't care anymore. I haven't input the price yet, because actually, I'm sorry, I have put in the price. If they decide that they're going to change, they don't like that price, we can go ahead and change it, manually on the form. And then I just, then nobody's going to have a copy of it. So I really don't necessarily need to give them a copy of it at the moment, but I usually bring two. So, all right. So we change it, they initial it, we initial it. Commissions, I've always got commissions in there. I had one agent, it was interesting. He was telling me, he says, here's how I do the commissions. I put in, I manually put in 6, 7, 8, and I said, really? Oh, that's pretty cool. Why you do that? And they said, well, because I tell them to pick which one they want. And I go, oh, okay. So there's really no conversation about commissions. The law says that we have to tell them the commission is negotiable, right? But we don't have to negotiate. That's not what the law says. The law says we have to tell them it's negotiable, but we don't have to necessarily negotiate. And I always tell the seller, hey, you know what? You're right. The law says that I have to tell you it's negotiable. And at this point, we're going up. And so I can usually stop the commission question with the seller by a little bit of humor and say, hey, we're going to go up. You keep talking, we're going up. Okay. All right. So anyway, so the 6, 7, or 8, and the guy says, invariably, they almost always sign 6, but there was no 5 there. right? Or whatever way you want to do it. Okay. This is what I'm just telling you. This is just a method that one agent was doing. So why is it the last form? Because it's got everything they want to talk about. Pricing discussion's already done, folks. I always give them a 30-day, 60-day, 90-day price. So I ask them, how soon do you need to sell? Well, we need to sell it, by tomorrow. Well, then here's the tomorrow price. Okay. All right. So commission discussion's already done. Sell your services, not your price. This is where you should be talking about how quickly do you need to sell, right? Because then now I know what their motivation level is. And now, we want to be with the grandkids in Utah. And it's like, okay, good. So how soon do you want to be with the grandkids in Utah? Well, we're not in an incredible hurry. Seriously, it's your grandkids. And so they'll usually go, okay, you're right. We're in a hurry, right? But, so again, bring your sense of humor to the table. You got to remember that. It's kind of important. So many people, they think it's a really stuffy appointment, but it really isn't. We're just talking, okay? What is your reason? What's your motivation for selling now? What attracted you to purchase this house in the first place? Not home. What attracted you to purchase the house? And you're writing all this stuff down, right? Because you're working on your marketing plan while you're sitting there, okay? So when they tell you this is why we bought the house, you want to make sure that's in your remarks section. Not that it's across the street from the bar maybe, but you've got they're giving you the what sold them on the house, and so you probably want to put that stuff in the remarks. I always send them a copy of the remarks and say, here, is this going to be okay, or do you want me to add anything to it, right? So do you have any favorite pictures? They probably got better pictures than I've got, right? So, my guy can't get out there to take sunset because he works 9 to 5, right? So can you give me a list of upgrades that you have done? By the way, the pictures, they often have really good pictures. And so they'll have we have this beautiful sunset. And so again, don't spend too much time on that because you need to get out of there. All right. But can you give me a list of the upgrades that you've done to the house? And so who did them? And do you have any receipts? And so those are going to be important things because I may have to go back and look at the value again. And that RPR program gives me the ability to put in, remodel done at this point for this much money. How much did that impact the value of the property? Okay. So work the referral. Where are you moving to? Okay. I probably know somebody there that can help you. Right. And so, you decide to go and work with them or not, but at least give them a shot. Okay. I know these people, right? If you ask me, I've got people in most every state that I know somebody somewhere, and I probably have a good referral source. epronar.com is a really good source. So, unpeel the onion. You need to ask a lot of questions. And I put that in bigger letters. Again, one of the things that Linda won't let me talk to her for the first 2 hours in the morning because she's still waking up. Every day it's like this. I'm still waking up. Okay. So I'm not allowed to ask questions. It just upsets her. So I just go do my thing. I work, right? But unpeel the onion. Ask these people a lot of questions. They don't care how much you know until they know how much you care. And so ask a lot of questions. They think you actually care. Write down the answers, okay? Remember, talk less, listen more, okay? Write everything down in front of them. Let them know you're taking notes. It's not a secret, okay? Brag about your brand. Be proud to be where you are, wherever that is, okay? So coordinate your strategy. Don't be a secret agent. Real estate is a full contact sport. I want you to remember that. If you don't make full contact, you're going to have trouble. Okay. All right. I am here to help. Okay. So as we're wrapping this up here, I want a couple minutes over. I'm doing better than I usually do. So thank you for joining us. But I wanted you to know that, so we have a bit.ly, we have a short link. This is called a short link. So if you want to look at Teresa, if you want to look at all of the webinars and everything, and I'm still loading them, okay, but I've probably got a dozen of them in there that I've done most recently. This morning's and this afternoon's will probably go in there tonight, okay, but case is important. bit.ly/real-estate-ed. That is our shortcut link. Okay, so if you click on that, it takes you to our website that has, whoops, it took us to our website. Look at that. I clicked on the link. Okay, so look here. This is where it took us. This is our link. Okay, so this has got all the videos. And look at all the videos. Look, everything is in here. And some of them, they look like repeats, but it's because of when they were done. So like this is the most current residential property management at the beginning. You see all this? This is all the Paragon rules, things like that. So this is complete videos, complete by me. I've done all of these. Okay, these are all mine, and so I've done all these, and I think I mentioned it to you earlier that I've got the Department of Real Estate is looking at my final revision on my RPA class. And that'll be for credit. So it'll be 5 hours of credit, but you got to sit there for 5 hours. And I'm going to be traveling all over California teaching that class. So that's your link. All right. And then please remember to like and subscribe. It would help me. I understand that helps my traffic. I can't imagine that we're going to hit more than 1,000 people. I only turned it up yesterday. So, probably won't hit 1,000 people by today, but you definitely want to be on there. And you can always go back in there and find out what's new. Saves you having to wander around looking for it. Okay. Education at SDAR.com. I love our education. It is a department. It's not just a committee. It's got funding. It's got things. We want to help you. So if you have classes that you think would be interesting, then please let us know. Thank you, Dolly. Thank you again for being here. If you have classes that you think would be interesting and you want us to do them, let SDAR know. You can always send it to me and I'll send it to them, that kind of thing. I am always available for you. I want to help you. I want you to be successful. I really do. There's really no excuse. You got somebody who knows what they're talking about says, I will help you. So, you need to take advantage of that resource. Okay. So send me an email. If you're not getting the newsletter, send me an email, but you have to specifically say, or actually on my email actually has a link when I respond to you, and it actually has a link to sign up for the newsletter. And I'm going to be, after we're done with this, I'm going to be putting on that bit.ly code. Okay. So, this one is going to be on my signature line from now on. That says, you can look at all my webinars at the YouTube website. They're all free, by the way. They're free at the moment. They're free. I'm being told I need to be charging for this, but if I ever do charge, it'll be just to put a firewall up because I don't necessarily want opposing counsel to see some of my videos, but anyway, but if I charge, it'll be like $5. It's not going to be anything. But because I'm not here to make money on it, I just want you to be okay. All right. So all that being said, any other questions? No. Again, thank you so much. I appreciate the value of your time. I'm gonna let you run. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I hope your Memorial Day. Remember, we're Memorial Day is to remember those who have given them the ultimate sacrifice. So please don't be calling veterans and saying thank you for your service, because that's not what Memorial Day is. Memorial Day is remembering those that have gone. So Veterans Day is where you call all your buddies, and certainly I've got a long list of people I'm really appreciative of. So that being said, we're all good. I want to thank you all for being here today. As we say from my hometown of Del Mar, I look forward to seeing you around the track. Take care for now, everybody. Bye-bye.